Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us on a Monday night for a change. We've got Kate Wilson tonight from the NBU. She's head of NBU and she's got a presentation for us. And then people have sent in questions, which we will go through at the end. We will try and answer as many as we can tonight. And if we run out of time, then we will ask Kate if she'll answer them separately. And then we'll provide you all with those answers that we haven't covered tonight. So over to you, Kate. Thank you.
Thank you, and good evening all. Thanks for inviting me along this evening. Kate Wilson, head of APHA's National B Unit. I'm standing in for Nigel Semments tonight, who was due to speak to you. So apologies for the rescheduled date, and as you say, on a Monday, which I think is slightly out the ordinary for these meetings. But really pleased to be speaking to you all tonight. I am working slightly blind, so I've only got the slide deck in front of me, so I can't see anything else. So apologies for that. But I've also got Tom Bickerdike, who's kindly agreed to dial in. Tom is the Regional Bee Inspector for the South East of England and has dealt firsthand with many of the yellow-legged hornet outbreaks that we've had to date. So some of the questions were around that kind of operational insight and how we work closely with the yellow-legged Asian hornet team. So Tom may be able to provide some kind of first-hand insight into that. So just covering a little bit about what I'm going to work through. There's not too many slides, so hopefully thinking about kind of 25 minutes of slides and then really the opportunity to provide questions and answers. So I'm going to have a little look back at the historic incursions. Again, don't want lots of people on this call will have a really good idea of what we've been dealing with over the last 10 years and some of the kind of headline figures from 2025. So I don't want to kind of go over this point too much, but I will have a quick look back at the overview of what we saw in 2025, and then really moving on to looking at the approach for 2026, some of the kind of wider developments that we've been working on. And then, like I say, really having a look, oh, those numbers don't add up, but at the Q&A, like I say, thank you for those that have submitted questions in advance. I've tried to weave through some of the slides, some of the themes that came up from questions, but as I say, very happy to then try and answer some of those specifics towards the end there. And as we say, if there's anything that between myself and Tom we can't answer, we'll take away and come back to you in written form. So again, this really shouldn't be a surprise for anyone, but really looking at the timeline of yellow-legged hornet nest outbreaks since 2016, when we had our first one. We saw that peak in 2023 when we had 72 nests, and then that continued to look at the kind of cumulative number of 268 nests by the end of 2025. So really just having a little look back at the 2025 season itself, and starting off with the spring trapping campaign that we undertook in England. So this was following the 2024 season and the nest report that was produced by Ferroscience Limited, which identified 6 locations of higher risk for those nests reaching maturity. So we had 4 areas that we were looking at in East Sussex and 2 areas of Kent, which ultimately were identified as hotspots. DEFRA agreed for APHA to undertake spring trapping. So that trapping took place for a period of 8 weeks between April and June. We ran a 7-day-a-week rota to try and reduce as far as possible bycatch, so that we were checking those traps no less than every 3rd day. Overall, we had 43 APHA staff involved in that trap checking. So as you can see, a huge undertaking, huge resource intensity. And altogether, they checked 5,500 trap records across 350 traps. the kind of end result of that was that within the MBU, within those 350 traps, 5 gynes were found, and then we had 23 further reports through the Asian Hornet Watch app. And you can see the map that's shown on that slide there, where the blue dots represent where our trap locations, and the green diamonds, if you call them, are where we had reported queens. So really that just gives you an idea of the kind of approach to spring trapping that was taken in 2025. As I touched upon, we saw 163 nests altogether in 2025, deriving from 546 sightings. So no surprise again. So the majority of those we had in the southeast of England, so Kent, East Sussex, down into Surrey, but also we had kind of wider geographical range of those. So as you can see on the map that's shown, up into York, across to Cheshire, down as far as the Isles of Scilly, but then also Dorset and Hampshire. So we are seeing the kind of general increase in geographic range and spread of those yellow-legged hornet nests. We also had our first finding of yellow-legged hornet in Wales. So this was a dead nest that was actually reported in January of this year, which, following investigation, was confirmed by 4 adult yellow-legged hornets that were found dead in the nest. Welsh Government set up their lead government department meetings and established the kind of rhythm for looking at their outbreak, obviously given it was the first confirmed finding of yellow-legged hornets. And following that local investigation, we identified the local pest controller, who confirmed that the destruction of that nest happened in late September. And in hindsight, there was suspicion that he was also called out to destroy what he now believes was probably the primary nest in May of that year. So again, that feeds into that 163 nest total that we are now referring to for the 2025 season. Again, just quite an interesting infographic, really what we would expect to see, but it just talks about the kind of type of nests, but also displays the timings of those different types of nests. So starting off in April, May with the embryo nests, then on to the primary nests in the kind of June, July time, and then obviously the peak of secondary nests found between July and November. So yeah, just quite a nice infographic showing what we really thought, what we would expect from those types of nests throughout the year. Also, at the kind of after we'd undertaken the spring trapping, some of the results from the ferret analysis, identified through some of the microsatellite analysis some of the relatedness that we were aware of. So what we knew after the 2025 spring trapping campaign is essentially we saw 2 lines, 2 areas of lineage between 2 generations of nests. So both the Beckley and the Alcombe nests in 2023 then resulted in nests in 2024 related to queens that were found in early 2025. And what we now know, so this was information that was produced through a PhD that was undertaken by Sarah Griffin, Dr. Sarah Griffin, now with Ferra Science Limited. And essentially, Sarah looked at trying to establish a new method for how the genetic analysis was undertaken for yellow-legged hornet, but also for other species. The work that she did, as I say, was undertaken as a PhD, but we had some really good information in terms of the incursions of yellow-legged hornets since 2016, and some really good sample information and metadata related to those. So it was a really good case study for her to look at. The kind of headlines of that, and again, this is still to be kind of published data, but we had this shared with us and with the Bee Health Advisory Forum in December of last year, is it now allows us to have a better understanding of that bigger picture, and what that analysis found was ultimately nests. We now know that nests are more related to each other than we previously knew through the macrosatellite method. The analysis showed previously unknown relationships at both a second and third order. So that's aunt, niece, and cousin relatedness, kinship between those nests, and nests related as far back as 2021. So that means essentially the incursions that we had between 2016 and 2020, we believe were kind of successfully eradicated through the destruction of those individuals. But from 2021, we started to see kind of breeding at the kind of UK level. What that now looks like, and bear in mind this is data that looks back between 2016 and 2024, it strongly suggests kind of a limited UK resident populations, as well as new incursions, as we kind of initially thought, and as some of the models told us in terms of seeing that low level resident population as well as new incursions from the continent. What I would say is we're still to receive the 2025 genetic report, so we've got no further information, but I guess we're hypothesizing that we will continue to see this picture of relatedness between some of this as well as those new incursions. So just a little look at what that looks like for 2026. So from a government strategy perspective, really at an outbreak level, you shouldn't see too much change. So both DEFRA in England and the Welsh Government in Wales have committed to continuing with a government-led and funded response for outbreak. As I've talked before, both bee health and invasive non-native species is a devolved policy area in the UK. So those individual nations can take their relative policies and decisions at a country level. But on the whole, both England and Wales are working in line with the published contingency plan. Like I say, the position in England is obviously further evolved given it's had outbreaks here since 2016, and obviously Welsh Government is dealing with its first known outbreak. So yeah, as I say, on the ground operationally at a beekeeper level, they shouldn't see much change. So UKCEH continue to be the lead partner for receiving the yellow-legged hornet reports through the Watch app, and they will gather and triage those reports and then send through, as they did last year, only those sightings that are confirmed by an image to the National Bee Unit. So the templates are exactly the same as last year in terms of if people are unable to get a photo, it talks about either how you can establish safely to get a photograph, or contact your local yellow-legged Asian hornet team coordinator to support you in doing that. Again, the National Bee Unit in APHA continue to be the lead team for delivering that track and trace response. Again, we can lean on the wider APHA workforce to support us in doing that. And APHA is a wildlife team, again supported by the National Bee Unit, continue to be the lead team for the destruction and removal, with science undertaken by Ferrer Science Limited. So hopefully that's familiar ground. Like I say, there is no real change in any of that in terms of outbreak response, how a report moves through the process in terms of being reported through the app, getting to the MBU to triage and respond to, and then those nests being found and then destroyed and removed. There has obviously been some change in terms of the approach to spring monitoring at a government-led level. So in December 2025, DEFRA took the decision, and the decision was made by the DEFRA Bee Health Programme Board in conjunction with their non-native species policy teams, not to commission APHA to deliver spring trapping in 2026, as we've done for the previous 2 years. And that, given the kind of wider geographic range of nests, and particularly nests that we've seen of higher risk of reaching maturity, that they wanted that concentration of resource and effort to be on that nest detection and destruction in the later season, and to look at front loading other bee health priorities, such as foul brood and our general exotic surveillance. Obviously, like I say, in Wales, they have taken a different decision with the first nest there. So in March of this year, it was decided by the Welsh government to commission APHA to deliver spring trapping around the area of 5k within the Wrexham nest, or the nest near to Wrexham, between April and June of this year. So, as I referenced earlier, because of that devolved policy, we've got slightly divergence which the approach is taken across England and Wales, but both governments remain committed to tackling yellow-legged hornet and dealing with those that outbreak response in the later season. DEFRA have provided a list of 32 nests that were identified in England last year, that FERA have calculated to have a higher probability, so between 18 and 50% of producing drones, and therefore reaching the higher risk of reaching sexual maturity. So those lists have been provided out to Martin Smith as part of the ER2 and the BBKA, if there were to be kind of local initiatives or national initiatives through the Asian Hornet teams to undertake spring trapping. So that information has been shared down to that 1 kilometre square level. There was some questions around why that information can't be shared at a kind of a more granular detail. Some of the approach to that is around GDPR and where those nest locations are. So they've had to take kind of a general principle around reducing the risk of identifying particular individuals around that, which is kind of the logic behind disclosing it to a 1 kilometre square level. And then looking at some of the kind of wider developments in the yellow-legged hornet space. So technology is really key to how we deliver our response. And the ArcGIS app that APHA developed in conjunction with FERA is really key to our operational response in terms of doing the track and trace and reporting that information through. So we continue to make updates to that app to make sure that its performance is still delivering what we need it to, but also it's got enhanced features that make our work more efficient, more effective in the field. We also had real success with use of the Robonature tracking units last year, and then we've continued to buy additional units to help support, again, that increased spread, or the likelihood of increased geographic range of nests in the coming year. We've also worked quite closely over the years with the University of Exeter, the VESP AI. So again, we'll be seeking to deploy some of the units they've got for remote monitoring, particularly in some of those outlier locations where it's more difficult to have regular monitoring of bait stations. So that, again, we're hoping to use some of those units. And they're also looking at different nest destruction methods. So in the continent Hoover, some of the hoovers are used. So looking at what options we've got alongside our kind of traditional methods for where nests are, for example, over watercourses or kind of low to the ground where the hoovers might be effective. Again, in terms of potentially dealing with increased numbers of nests. We're looking at what our kind of contractor arrangements look like, particularly around nest removal, and just making sure that we've got a bit more resilience in that space. So that's how we kind of subcontract and have available to us tree climbers and the use of cherry pickers for nest removals. So the contract management team in APHA have done some work and put some notices out in some of the arboricultural magazines to try and increase the known contractors that are equipped and have suggested that they can be involved in those types of removals and have the appetite to do so. So we're building up that database and our knowledge across all of the nations, the regions for the NBU. And again, with the pest controller training, so we use Killgerm to make sure that our nest destruction teams are suitably qualified. And we've worked with Killgerm to look at what they can do in the commercial space to make that training more readily available, more accessible to pest controller. So pest controllers from a commercial capacity, if we did need to increase our capacity of that using external contractors. We've now got the advert live for a permanent NBU operational lead for Outbreak, which is the kind of permanent replacement for Pete Davis following his departure at the end of last year, which from my perspective is really positive news that we've had that support from the agency and that commitment to having that role permanent to support the kind of national coordination of both the yellow-legged hornet but also wider outbreaks in the bee health space. And we are working with other governments, so through the British Irish Council, with the Republic of Ireland, Northern Ireland, and separately with our colleagues in Scottish Government to look at the UK response to this threat, but also supporting governments, the Ministry for Primary Industries in New Zealand, with the threat that they're facing, and working how we could share best practice and work together to have better understanding of this threat and also the response options that might support the UK approach. So just, I'm sure you've seen this slide before, but really just reiterating about how you can help. Really, the message is continue doing what you're doing. Your involvement in the awareness raising and supporting the identification of yellow-legged hornet and making sure that these reports get through to the teams that need to deal with them is really crucial. So I just want to pass on a huge thanks to everybody that's involved in that, and just continue to kind of raise that awareness in your kind of local areas. I've put this slide in really just to talk a little bit about our operational structuring, because some of the questions that we had was really around the communication and why we can't share more, but also our approach to timely sharing of the information that we can at a local level with the Asian Hornet teams. So I just wanted to, on the left-hand side, just quickly look at our operational structure for an outbreak, and this is common to any outbreak that we would be dealing with. But from an APHA perspective, we've got our national operation lead, which is that vacancy that we've got at the minute, and we've got admin support that underpins that role. And then at a local level, we identify incident commanders who are responsible for delivery of individual outbreaks, individual local incidents. And then clearly under that, we've got teams that support each one of those. So if you can imagine, those blue boxes represent an individual response to a nest. So the teams that undertake track and trace. And in any given area, you might have multiple track and trace teams working to identify and discover nests that are all led under that incident commander. Then to one side, we've got the APHA destruction team that once a nest is identified and located, they are called upon to then undertake the site assessment and deliver the kind of destruction and removal elements of that outbreak response. And like I say, that can be supported by subcontractors subcontractors in the form of tree climbers and additional equipment with cherry pickers. So there's quite a lot that happens. And if you imagine, this is just from a confirmed report coming in. So there's quite a lot of that happens to get to the point of us being able to confirm a nest. And obviously it's quite an extended period of time that we operate within. So really, if you're thinking of the peak season between July and November, we've got an enduring period of time that we're continuing to respond to higher volumes of these nests. So these individuals, or these roles that we're talking about, are never delivered by one individual. We've got a rota, we've got a series of people that come in and take over these roles on that kind of rota basis. So it won't, whilst predominantly to start with, your incident commander is likely to be the regional bee inspector for those areas, with seasonal bee inspectors working underneath. Hopefully you can see that quite quickly changes as the numbers increase, particularly as we have concurrent outbreaks and concurrent nests that we're responding to. So we do need to have protocols in place for the communication to make sure that we've got that system working. And on the right hand side, you can see kind of our process for dealing with that, bearing in mind this is official information. So we get the operational confirmation that a nest has been found following reports in. We've then got a requirement to provide the policy teams, both in DEFRA, Welsh Government, and with that notification, that formal notification, they are then responsible for delivering the ministerial updates, from which follows the public announcements, which you'll be familiar with through the Bee Health Advisory Forum and on the rolling news on BeeBase. So there's quite a lot of formality that kind of sits behind us getting information out to where it needs to be. From my perspective, the liaison with the yellow-legged Asian Hornet teams on the ground can happen before that operational confirmation. We want to try and work together as far as possible to make sure that we're sharing that information, that it's informing the response on the ground without compromising any sort of regulation that we need to comply with in terms of GDPR or our effectiveness of doing track and trace. So hopefully that just, I guess, sets the scene a little bit on where we're coming from, but also provides a commitment that we are committed to working at a local level, or those incident commanders are committed to working at a local level with the yellow-legged Asian Hornet teams to kind of share as far as possible what we know and likewise seek that local support and guidance. So I will stop there. I don't know what I'm like for time, but happy to take any questions. Thank you very much for listening. And as I said before, for all of your input to date and continued commitment to supporting awareness raising of this threat.
Thanks, Kate. Let me
No
stop you sharing. There we go. Thank you. We've got a big list of questions and you've covered a couple of them. There's some fresh ones in the chat, actually. Let me just have a quick look on there. How does this new view on relatedness impact our approach to monitoring and trapping? Surely we should be doing more and wider.
So I think it's kind of, you can look at it from different angles. And we had a bit of a conversation about this at the Bee Health Advisory Forum with other stakeholders around, I guess, the argument of what's important versus what's effective. So the kind of DEFRA position on not delivering government-led spring trapping is to try and look at that kind of detection. And they don't necessarily see spring trapping as an effective control method, although it can help with control. So I think if you think about it in the context of the spring trapping campaigns that we've delivered previously and the numbers of queens that were found and also the locations of those queens. So 5 queens found within our traps last year across that huge geographic range, compared with the 23 that then were reported and popping up in locations that we didn't, well, from the analysis, weren't considered high risk. compared with then the later season outbreak, where essentially we've dealt with nearly 100% of reports and detected a nest off the back of those reports. So I think that's where it comes into having to look at the resource commitment involved, and the detection rate of the different approaches. So I think it's not saying that spring trapping can't help, but we need to be aware of limiting the impact of bycatch or the risk of bycatch, and also volunteer fatigue, which is huge. We are aware of how much effort goes into to this work from volunteers. So I think it's about being proportionate and actually thinking about later season where we don't want people to become fatigued because they've spent almost the whole season doing some form or other of monitoring for yellow-legged hornet. So hopefully that helps explain the kind of where we're coming from with the approach to spring monitoring.
Thanks. Ian asks, does continued response mean continuation of eradication phase of the contingency plan?
It means continued action in line with the contingency plan. So with the data, with the information that we now know around having a limited established population, I guess that we could argue till the cows came home about whether eradication would still be considered possible. But what it means from DEFRA, they continue to be committed to taking action against all reported sightings, and therefore, obviously, nest detection.
Thank you. Martin asks, how is NBU and DEFRA working with other stakeholders beyond the world of beekeeping who appear to be leading on the ground?
Yeah, so that's very much true that the National Bee Unit, from really the kind of very start of looking at yellow-legged hornet as a threat to the UK many years ago, has led on the operational response and obviously developed the contingency plans. But we work really closely with our colleagues in the non-native species side. So from a policy position, they're working really closely with the bee health policy teams. But from a stakeholder engagement, the NBU take the lead with the beekeeping sector as stakeholders, but the non-native species secretariat lead on all of the other wider stakeholder engagement. So they've got a huge network of partners, which we can link out to if that's useful for you all to see, but a huge network of partners across their non-native species work that they also raise the awareness of this threat to. So that's the kind of separation. So the NBU lead on the beekeeper relationship and the non-native species on that wider stakeholder relationships.
Thank you. The Netherlands avoid using insecticides, and in Spain, insecticides are a last resort. What are the NBU's thoughts and guidance on different nest destruction methods?
So I did, I think this was one of the questions that came in advance. So I've saw some feedback from other colleagues as well. So thank them for their feeding into this question. But essentially, within the UK, we need to work with what's legislative, so regulatory wise, what we can use, but also what's then going to be effective and efficient. So, as you know, we are using insecticide for the majority of nests, but we've looked at alternate options for where nests are over watercourses, for example, and we might need to take a slightly different tact. We have looked at use of some of the kind of hoovers that are used on the continent. I think each of them have their different pros and cons, but in terms of looking at that overall picture and ensuring that we've got something that's quite efficient and works the majority of cases, the hoover probably has limited application as it currently stands, but it's something that we'll continue to kind of explore and look at the options around. And obviously the other kind of non-treatment approach to that, we need to consider things around health and safety, and what that looks like for our inspectors dealing with nests that aren't pre-treated before removal. So obviously we've got huge considerations around that.
Thank you. recognising the legal framework, it's illegal to release a hornet. Have you got any views on when and how associations can upskill their members on tracking yellow-legged hornets in preparation for the withdrawal of NBU on activities?
Yeah, I mean, we've worked with the BBKA looking around some of the licensing arrangements with Natural England, which led to the development of that training pack around track and trace. So we've always kind of said that the actual, in terms of that upskilling element, track and trace, the principles of track and trace can also be used on native species, so European hornets, wasps potentially. So hopefully that's what that training package kind of alludes to, in the sense of you don't need a yellow-legged hornet to upskill on the principles of track and trace. But obviously we continue to work with the BBKA around what that kind of preparedness looks like.
Thanks. And this one's actually for Tom. What are Tom's three critical success factors in joint working so that other associations can benefit from the great relationship he has in Kent?
Yeah. Well, first of all, obviously, is uppermost is maintaining good communications with everybody involved. We had a very good active WhatsApp group this year in Kent, using all the Kent Lake Hornet coordinators, and we shared information on there and communicated on there, and that was extremely important going forward. Often we would be receiving information of hornets that had been found in traps and things, had been recorded and put through on the Asian Hornet Watch app, but the information came through to us quicker by that route, so we were prepared the following morning, ready to move once the report finally came through. So that was extremely good. Obviously, trust as well. Trust is hugely important. We need to trust each other, trust people that people are doing things that we ask them to do, and AHATs and things trust us, and coordinators trust us when we're giving information out, things of locations and areas of locations. And sometimes we're a bit candid working them closer one-to-one relationships, so we're a bit more candid about exact locations where these nests are, without obviously giving away any private details of the people of the lands that might be on there, so just to give a bit more of a heads up where those nests are. And I think what's really important for us as well as if we're asking you to do monitoring and things, is realistic expectations. We're asking people to give up a huge amount of their own time and effort to go out and do monitoring for us, either before and often some cases after we've found nests and things. It's just the expectations shouldn't be too great that there's too much burden put on people, and we have to be realistic the fact that what people are able to achieve and to help us, so we're not exhausting people and getting people too tired.
Thank you. There's a question about nest destruction, that NBU are no longer instrumental. I think you've sort of covered that in your talk, Kate. Do you want to just clarify that point again?
Yeah, I saw that question come through before. Not sure where you've heard that from, but yeah, as far as we're concerned, and DEFRA and Welsh Government, is APHA, the National Bee Unit, continue to be the lead for destruction. Again, we remain committed to undertaking that activity.
Thank you. And someone in Cheshire is reviewing their contingency plan for the future beyond what's being done currently. Will there be examples of best practice that you can share?
Yeah, we can do. Like I say, we have already worked in terms of that training package and trying to provide some of the information that we've got available on track and trace, but we will continue to kind of work with those teams to develop those products and try and move forward, looking at that kind of longer term sustainability.
Thanks. And I think we can put associations in touch with other associations as well. The ones perhaps in Kent that have done lots of really close work, they might be good examples for other associations to learn from, perhaps.
Yeah, I think Tom would say it's fair to say that the work that they've done down in the southeast and the relationships with the allied Asian Hornet teams has certainly evolved over the last, well, probably more so in the last 4 to 5 years, but ever since the kind of first nests back in 2016, we've certainly seen that relationship evolve and improve, and we would expect to see that replicated in other parts of the country as well.
Thank you. There's a question from, I'm not sure who that one's from actually, wanting an electronic feed of data to both catch and ER2 so that people know what's going on. And I suspect they want live data so that they can see more easily when something's been mapped and officially reported.
Yeah, so I mean, it's not something that we've currently got placed nor are actively working on. It's not to say that we can't look at that development in the future. At the minute, my priority is making sure that we've got a functional app that does what we need it to in the field. But we can certainly look at longer term improvements. Obviously, with the ER2 monitoring data, we've got that push feed, so a one-way feed between ER2 sharing the monitoring data with the MBU application. I know we've had recent conversations about the use of the catch app as well. Obviously, as it stands, there isn't that feed, although that automatic feed that happens with that. But yeah, we can certainly look at what the options are for that kind of longer term use. We'll work with the BBK to try and establish essentially a framework for how we might more closely work together and a kind of a future look at that as well. So it's certainly something that if we had those arrangements in place more formally, within that we can look at data protection, data sharing, and making sure that we've got that set up how it should be. One of the limiting factors that we've got is around the way that the current watch app is set up and how that works with CEH, because at the minute there is no agreement, there is no kind of consent that is provided when a reportee submits a report into the system that allows that information to be passed on. So I think, yeah, we'd need to look into the detail of exactly how that worked and at what point that information was fed back and forth. But like I say, it's not something we're actively working on, but it could be something we looked at for the future.
Thank you.
Slowly falling into darkness. I'm just going to pop the light on.
There's a question about the buzzcopper yellow-legged hornet identifier. I believe you said you've got some Vespa AI devices. How many Vespa AI devices will you be deploying this season?
So obviously the way that works is there's quite a limited number, and so I think we've requested about 5 for use in the later summer season, but obviously we're competing with the kind of other countries that are utilising over the world. So that's the kind of current conversation that we've got ongoing with the University of Exeter around that. But yeah, we are aware of the buzzcopter work and interested to see again how that develops and what kind of potential use that has as well.
Thank you. I'll just go through the extra questions that have been added to the nest. If we are no longer in the eradication phase, does this mean Natural England embargo on trap and trace licenses will change?
I don't know, in all honesty. I can't speak on behalf of Natural England, but I think it's probably something that we collectively have worked together on. So the MBU have been involved in the conversations with DEFRA Health Policy, with Natural England, with BBKA about the kind of organisation of those licences and the arrangements in place. I think we've always had this principle of, whilst there's been a government-led response, so it isn't necessarily about the eradication phase specifically, it's about whilst there's a government government contingency response in place, it maybe wouldn't be sensible to deploy or provide a number of separate licenses. But again, that's not my remit, and I can't speak on behalf of Natural England.
Thank you. Once in the UK, there is a thought that yellow-legged hornets follow a defined watercourse or source. is that something you believe is the case from what's been found?
I don't know whether, Tom, you want to add anything more. It might be one that we have to take away. I mean, certainly from my own kind of understanding and the kind of work that we've looked at to date, is some of the earlier models suggested that obviously that there's heavy reliance on water in terms of their establishment or their kind of management. I would say what we're seeing is more in tune with hitchhiking and road networks and those types of things, which again has been identified as a risk pathway. I'm not sure that we've necessarily seen it, but nor have we maybe looked at that association with watercourses per se. Tom, I don't know whether you can say
maybe.
more.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, not following rivers as anything like that would say there's no evidence that they follow rivers or watercourses like that. I mean, obviously, there's some evidence. Perhaps there's movement of incursion down the Thames estuary into London, perhaps. But we are aware that they do need water to collect water, and it's readily available in the surrounding area. And we have picked up hornets feeding in and around sort of small ponds and lakes and things in the past. So there is a connection with water, large expanses of water or ponds and things where hornets are probably attracted to, possibly to collect some water at some times or other, or other insects are accumulate around water as well. So there is a slight link, but it's no real strong evidence to suggest anything really positive about that in that way at the moment, really.
Thank you. And there's a question about the genetics results. When are you actually expecting them? Do you have a ballpark date for that?
So I think DEFRA are expecting the report from FERA next month. So again, I'm not sure at what level that report will be provided, and therefore what information following that will be released. But I think you can probably anticipate it'll be fairly in line with what you saw last year in terms of the level of information that's released from that and the timeliness of that.
Thank you. And what's the 5-year outlook for yellow-legged hornet in the UK, do you think?
I think from my perspective, we can expect to continue to now see increased numbers, volumes of nests. Like I say, we will continue to take action against those nests reported, but we are continuing to see new incursions from the continent, as well as that kind of local population and breeding. So I think it's probably fair to say that we'll continue to see increased numbers, but we will our response will remain in line with what the DEFRA and Welsh Government policy is on yellow-legged hornet. So yeah, that's probably all I can say at this point. But we'll continue to look at that future plan and what that looks like, and that long-term preparedness for the UK of managing this threat.
Thank you. I think that's all the questions from the chat. Oh, someone's asked for a link to the research paper on Sarah Griffin's new method. Did you say that wasn't live yet?
Yeah, it's not yet published. They're obviously working towards that. I think probably that won't be available for a few months to come. So at the minute, it is just that information that's been shared to date. But obviously, as and when that hopefully gets published, obviously those peer-reviewed elements will be available as well.
Thanks. Dave, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Sure, Diane, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Sorry, I was just putting a question on the chat, but you said we've come to the end of the questions. I thought, hang on a minute, wait for me. Yeah, sorry, Kate. You spoke about the observations that you think that the incursions are coming through from transit hubs. That sort of information about where hornets are being detected is really important for us, because it will allow us to, as an association, to target certain areas. We know where the local transit hubs are in our area. If they're seen foraging on fishmonger, or if they're seen on ivy or something like that, is really critical for us. So if you could share that sort of information on a regular basis, that would be really useful. And if you can consolidate it as well. So if you can say in spring they're mothering fishmongers or markets and places like that, that'd be really useful, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that we're necessarily seeing any kind of general trends such as that, but certainly where we've got that information, or we've got information that we think is quite pertinent to the sighting, we're trying to share that on B-Base. So a really easy observation is where we've seen them on ferries, we will state that the sighting has occurred on a ferry, which then gives kind of wider context to that sighting. But likewise, if we see them in distribution centres or motorway services, whatever it might be, we will try and add that to the rolling news on B-Base. I think collectively we've probably not looked at fully analysed that information, but yeah, I take your point on board, so thank you.
Yeah, and if you can consolidate it, so we found 5 in a service station, or yeah, that'd be great.
Cheers, Dave. Yeah, I mean, there was one sighting or 2 sightings that were near racing stables or race courses, wasn't there? And I think that raised a few eyebrows. Lucy, do you want to ask your question? You have to unmute.
No, I just wanted to encourage Kath C from Preston to ask her question so that everyone can have the answer.
Right, is Kath there?
I am.
Go on, ask your question.
So we've recently returned from Cyprus, where we went to go and have a look at the hornets early in the season. And over there, they actually actively they see hornets, and rather than track and trace them, they will have bait stations out where they monitor the bait station to make sure that it's only the hornets that are taking the poisoned bait. And they use a poison that is licensed to be used by farmers to destroy flies in farm sheds. So it's an approved insecticide that they use in bait, which they generally use cat food for. And within 7 to 10 days, they're not seeing any more hornets coming back.
Okay, it's not a product I'm particular familiar with. Obviously, in New Zealand and other places, there is aspects of remote monitoring that they're remote poisoning that they're looking at, which is like you described, where it's essentially laced baits, and then the idea is that the hornets then return that bait to the nest that kills the nest. I can't envisage a situation in the UK where we would do remote poisoning, given the other tools that we've got available to us for track and tracing, just because of some of the kind of wider environmental impact on native pollinators, native species. But yeah, like I say, I'm not familiar enough with the situation in Cyprus, so I'm happy to take that away. Tom, I don't know whether you know any more.
Yeah, I was just going to add, Kate, myself on that one. I would want to see a lot more research on that method carried out, really, because you're baiting a bait, obviously, and especially in the UK, I think it'd be very difficult not to try and prevent other insects getting to that bait as well, especially wasps and things. The yearleg hornets, they don't recruit foraging. So the hornets that find a bait station and use it tend to be quite protective over these bait stations, and in fact, even a little bit they sort of like go towards other hornets from the same nest as sort of a defensive measure to say, this is my bait, I want you to keep away from it. If another hornet from another nest was to find it at the same time, they tend to fight over the bait stations. So they don't recruit. So any hornets that are poisoned from that particular bait station will go back to the nest, will do some damage, but you'll still have maybe dozens of other hornets going off in other directions, feeding and foraging elsewhere. So I would be very skeptical for myself personally to see that the damage created in the nest would be sufficient to kill the nest from those little bait stations, which is laced with some kind of poison, really, and the risk to bycatch will be quite high as well, I think, myself personally. But so it wouldn't be I don't think it'd be sort of thing we'd be using in the UK at all.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Dylan, do you want to unmute?
Hi. Yeah, I was quite interested. One of the chat things, the guy from Newcastle started his question by talking about a move away from eradication policy. Is that the correct position, that we've moved away from eradication now as national policy?
How do I tell? I mean, we haven't got kind of a formal statement from DEFRA on that. Like I say, it's more around their continued commitment to control and take action against this species is absolutely still there. I think probably the bit that's up for debate is whether eradication is still possible with the kind of information that we now know around relatedness and potentially what's to come with further genetic analysis from 2025. I don't think there's a kind of a strong position either way, but I think that they are, like I say, continued committed to taking action. Still shows that they want to try and control and manage this threat as far as possible.
Okay, just a question related to that, I suppose, but there's been two incidents of sporadic situations, the one in Wrexham. Now, you've added a bit of meat to the bones on that, suggesting someone did try to destroy that nest last year. But when it was presented in, I think it was BBKA, it was suggested that it had survived through to late autumn when queens would have been produced. And therefore, there is potentially a number of queens in the environment in the Wrexham area. And I read somewhere about another similar situation in Sawtry in Cambridgeshire. Are you familiar with that? But because we're going to get, if we're not detecting the nest for whatever reason, and it's been very difficult on the ground because you're trying to encourage people to keep involved and motivated when nothing's happening. So I get that. But if we're missing them, then you're suddenly going to be faced with potentially a load of nests appearing in these localities, plus other situations where if we're a bit more vigilant, we find more nests. And I'm just a bit concerned about the resourcing of yourselves to deal with those nests. You've dealt with lots of nests in a concentrated geographical area, but if I'm phoning you from Sheffield saying we've got potentially 3 or 4 nests that we've come across, how long will it be between us reporting that and you'd be able to get people on the ground to do the track and trace and ultimately to the destruction? Because if we leave it to, because you've got Asian Hornet Week, and we originally talked about having a campaign to do some bait stations during that week, but in reality that week is too late because they're already by the end of September producing queens which could overwinter. So I'm just quite keen to know what resources are going to be available if there are more and more of these, because we're looking more diligently, because we're saying we don't want to end up in a Wrexham situation or a Sawtry situation.
Yeah, so just quickly to touch on the Sawtry, so that was a sighting that came in just this month following reports of essentially dead insects. Following up that report, it appears that there were yellow-legged hornets that were predating on a honeybee nest that was located in a cavity. So yeah, I mean, that leads us to believe that there was probably something that went unreported in that area during 2025, and therefore is there a risk in that area for 2026 overwintering queens? Then probably is the answer. We don't have enough information or evidence around that, but I think probably is a fair assessment. Going on to your kind of wider point around resource, yeah, I mean, part of my responsibility is making sure that from a response perspective, we have as streamlined, efficient and effective plans in place to deal with increased numbers of reports, increased numbers of nests. Working with the kind of wider Animal and Plant Health Agency, we can draw on additional resources. The agency is about 3,000 strong. Obviously that covers back office support and all of that, but we've got a wider workforce within the agency that we have drawn on in previous years and that we can continue to draw on. What we have done also over the previous few years is increase the skills and knowledge across that inspectorate workforce. So we're not starting from ground zero in terms of plant health, animal health inspectors having no knowledge. We've now got a group of probably about 70, 80 inspectors that now all have experience as a level of skill set within yellow-legged hornet. And again, we're doing work to try and invest up front in some of the kind of training of those inspectors to deal with that wider geographic range. I think that hopefully answers your question. In terms of the yellow-legged hornet week, the first week in September, which I think has been confirmed as the week for 2026. Again, it's just a time of year where people are most likely to see a higher number of hornets. So we know that's coming. We know there's huge kind of awareness campaigns around that, and therefore we can plan to respond to increased numbers of reports during that time. We prepare UKCEH for those that increased demand for verifiers and all of that. So some of those things, whilst you might feel that it's a bit late or we might be overwhelmed by the numbers within that week, actually that it's still a really useful campaign week for us, and we know that's coming, so we do kind of prepare for that in advance in terms of resourcing.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. Andy, you're next if you unmute.
Hi, thanks, Diane. Kate, thank you very much for joining us in the presentation, and also Tom. You can hear me all right, can you?
Yeah. We can, yep.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay. Yes, I think one of the things that I think a lot of the volunteers forget is their primary role. And talking of awareness, detection, and subsequently maintaining, as far as I'm concerned, an eradication policy, because I don't think our invertebrate population in Britain can tolerate what's happening in France by any stretch. But is the public education working on from a talk that was done in October by Jackie in Dover, is that the increase in number of the public reporting rather than just a few dotted volunteers was a source of optimism for her. And I concur, I join that. So I think the more we can get people involved, we're not asking a lot of them, but the more we can get people involved, the wider the spread. And I think a populace on board with us, as sort of citizen science, if you like, is even more effective than, a million AI detectors around there, because we've got 60 million people. And that's a policy we do with our volunteers. Obviously, we want to stay on top of if there should be an occurrence or a suspected occurrence around us, using more of the technology. But I think the really important thing is getting people on board. Do you not agree with that, Kate?
Yeah, no, absolutely agree. And I think that positive identification is really key to that. So understanding native pollinators and the identification of the yellow-legged hornet compared to our native pollinators. I think there's probably still quite a level of unknown in terms of what's native and what's non-native. So I think that is really crucial. The model and the kind of paper that was published showed that public reporting is such a key aspect of our control and eradication policy at that time. So yeah, I would absolutely agree. And I think thankfully for us, it's actually a threat that's managed to pick up quite a lot of national coverage, and that's very much down to all of your efforts, some of the kind of national level campaigns that have been driven by the BBKA and others. So yeah, I think that is really important, and trying to keep that at a national coverage level in terms of the media and other initiatives is really key. So that it's kind of going back to that previous question, but yeah, that yellow-legged hornet week is a real opportunity for us to increase that momentum at a really key time of the year. So yeah, we're really happy to support that, and really glad that the BBKA have got that initiative.
And I'd like to take that, if I can, a little bit further. It's more than a beekeeping thing, and we must really bring that out when we're talking to volunteers, and make volunteers more than just beekeepers as well. We can spread the news very quickly, especially with a large group of volunteers. You can identify people who can present things very well, who can get out there and educate the public wherever they can. And I think that's a mood for optimism. And when we talk about it's too late and, eradication can't be done, I personally think at this moment it's a nonsense to suggest that. Two, because we are using tools that have not been used before in Europe. Also, we have all the experience that Europe has. We're an isolated place from the point of view that we can contain it, even if we have to recontain it sometime later. And with, 154 nests versus an area of, let's say, Sevenoaks in Normandy would have 5,000 to 7,000 nests that they know about removed each year. So I think we're in no way in a out of control situation. And I just wanted to promote some optimism from that point of view and just encourage people, especially volunteers, to get out there and educate people, spread that vast number of people who are looking out and are a little more clever about what is an Asian Hornet. Quick click, app, boom, that's all they need. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Andy. Yeah, and I'd agree on the technology front as well, that we've always talked about. Actually, what that allows us to do is it buys us time for the future for all of this technology and innovation to develop. So, yeah, there's amazing things that happen in that space, and we'll continue to try and utilise them as far as possible.
Thank you.
Thanks. Before we go to Lucy, which I think will make the last question, Ian asks, will there be official advice on monitoring and trapping in different seasons based on risk?
When you say official advice, we certainly already have published our monitoring fact sheets that are on BBase, which talk about the types of monitoring and particularly, hopefully, cover that message around reducing the risk of bycatch, selective trapping, monitoring using bait stations as opposed to traps in some of the lower risk areas. So that is already available on BBase, and we'll continue to kind of refine that. But yeah, if people think there's something that's missing from that advice, then happy to take feedback.
Thank you. So Lucy, if you want to unmute.
Yeah, there was just Kate, your video has turned off, by the way.
Yeah, I don't know why. I don't think I've done anything different, but oh, there we go.
Oh,
Back
there
on.
you are again.
It's not
Wonderful.
purposeful.
Yeah, it was just to kind of summarize, I think, a few kind of strands of the questions that have come back, and to sort of clarify the message again around that. On the awareness front, to follow up on the Asian Hornet Week, I just wanted to make everyone aware also of Invasive Species Week, which is at the end of June. So that's another good touch point for raising awareness. And to let you know that Richard Senior, who is one of the AHAD coordinator, is working to develop a schools program. So it's a schools project for children after they finish their SATs and before the school year is over, and to give them the tools to basically recognize invasive species and know how to report them. And as part of that, to encourage them to build monitoring stations and to look at them and to record what they find. So hopefully that will give another point in the year during which we can raise awareness. And there's the BBK website already has a link there where schools and home educators, by the way, and parents can register interest to get access to this whole package of resources, which will be free. But the 2 points really that I wanted to clarify with you. The first one is, would it be correct to say that monitoring using bait station is appropriate everywhere this year? And when and how basically would you like to see monitoring taking place across the country? That's the first area. And the other sort of area that I see of concern looking at the chat is really about the definition of eradication. I hear a clear commitment to following up on every sighting this year. But I think it's fair to say that every end of season, there's renewed anxiety about what happens the following year. And this feeling that we ought to be ready to kind of take over at any point. People have talked about building their contingency plans, and really, I mean, to my mind, the contingency plans should be taking place with local authorities, and maybe not with beekeepers. And do you have any views about that, about how beekeepers should be positioned versus maybe sort of other government agencies whose role would be to to take over in a containment phase?
So I think it's probably more a policy question, but I think DEFRA certainly are looking at that kind of longer term planning for what this kind of involvement of the situation in the UK and in England might look like. So it's probably more a question that we can take away and come back in terms of the kind of policy position. I think probably what we're not going to see is kind of a cliff edge decision. So we will continue to work on transitional arrangements. I would encourage associations, beekeepers, but the wider sector as well, to look at preparedness. I don't think we can be overly prepared. So I think that's just an area that we would continue to encourage. We've had the contingency plan published for probably 12 years or so now. So hopefully that there has been thought around this threat and what the future of that might look like, and what we're seeing on the continent as well in terms of preparedness. But we will also look at some of the messaging to beekeepers, again, some of the products that are available to help protect apiaries if we saw further kind of levels of nests in a particular kind of concentration of an area. So there is kind of lots that we can think about, but the actual policy position obviously sits with both DEFRA and Welsh Government.
And in terms of the monitoring, would you say that monitoring is appropriate everywhere, and would you want this to be a short burst monitoring, or any sort of parting advice there for our AHATs?
Yeah, I mean, certainly monitoring in line with the guidance can be appropriate everywhere, as long as we're considerate of the bycatch and of the native species. I think that's the biggest concern out there, really, that there is this kind of widespread monitoring that actually, if not monitored in the true kind of intent of the word and the guidance that's out there, actually just becomes trapping. And therefore but if you're using bait stations, they're open stations, then yeah, and you're kind of
so wick stations and bus cuppers and SPIs are fine. It's the traps that you're concerned about.
Yeah, from that angle, from the bycatch. But I think the important point is around fatigue, and actually when you've got this enduring period of seasons, we've got long beekeeping seasons, we also might have long yellow-legged hornet seasons. We've got this element of volunteer fatigue and public fatigue, so I think it's just a balance of those messages, because if we're then asking beekeepers particularly to take action right through from April through to the end of kind of November time, that's a really long period for sustained commitment to that. So I think what we're saying is do what you can during this spring period, but actually it probably needs to be relative to the risk and relative to the effort, but really concentrate in those kind of later summer months where you're more likely to see higher populations, higher concentrations of hornets, and then we can react to the tracking and tracing and the nest destruction.
Thank you very much, Kate. That's very clear advice.
Maybe I can add a little bit to that as well, if that's of any help to you on that. Yeah, obviously, in areas of high risk where previous nests have been found, where they've known that guines have been produced the autumn before, there could be some spring monitoring going on in those areas to look for see if you pick up any queens in those areas. But I wouldn't recommend any spring monitoring outside of those areas at the time, because obviously the risk to bycatch is very, very high with all those, but a lot of the native queen wasps in the air and things, obviously establishing nests. Later on in the season, as the season goes on, we've found when the primary nests of yellow-legged hornets are developing from primary nest into secondary nest, and they may well be developing two nests at the same time, we find the hornets are very quick to come onto our baits. They're very hungry. They need to feed the nest. And then what they're doing is they're feeding the workers who are building these two nests and expanding, very big, rapid expansion. So from mid-June through to July, even into a little bit into August, is probably a peak time to really to try and get hornets where they're really attracted to the bait, and that could be a good time to set up some monitoring stations there, bait stations there, or traps there to see if you can pick up any workers. Likewise, you get through further into September, where you're going to get the maximum amount of hornets on the air and things, and that's obviously another good time to look to do some monitoring. But I would say don't do it continuously right the way through. What, even if some people can do 1 week, then take the traps away and give themselves a week's break and go and do another week, perhaps moving the traps into a different location. And that'll be just as good as trying to monitor continuously right the way through, because obviously it is a big ask. It's a long season, and people can very easily get tired of doing it and just start to miss checking those traps, and of course then the bycatch can then start to be quite extensive then.
Thanks, Tom. I think we will call it a night now. I know there are a couple of extra questions in the chat have come in, but I think if we don't stop it now, we'll actually be here at 10 o'clock still. I'd really like to thank Kate and Tom for coming this evening. And thank you to all the Asian Hornet team members who've come tonight. Thank you for giving up your evening as well. But thank you so much, Kate and Tom. It's been really useful tonight for everyone. Thank you.
No problem at all. Thanks for having us. If you want to send through those questions separately, very happy to take them. So thanks all.
Will do. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Cheers.